Hi, welcome back to Burning River Bushcraft. Today we're going to be making a metal core laminate slingshot. So I had another video recently where I made a laminated core slingshot. This was out of a piece of finished grade plywood that I happened to find. Now I went over that video how you just can't grab any piece of plywood and it's rather difficult to find. However, a lot of times metal is a lot easier to find locally. So what I have here is a 1/4 inch piece of aluminum. This is about perfect for a metal core slingshot. If this was a 1/4 inch steel, the slingshot would be quite heavy. I would go 3/16, I would go 1/8, I would go down to 10 gauge if I had to. This is something that's a lot easier to source than the laminate multiplex or finished grade plywood like I discussed in the other video. In a pinch, probably an old road sign or anything like that would work just fine for the core of the slingshot. So my last slingshot, I drew a template out and I actually used the hole saw and I used my belt grinder for most of the shaping. That would work just fine with this metal, this aluminum, steel, anything like that would work just fine. But for this video, I'm just going to make a straight, almost a Y-shaped slingshot. It's going to be a lot easier to form with just an angle grinder. You could do this with a hacksaw if you didn't have the equipment I had. This is going to be a lot easier build than the curved, rounded slingshot that I made in the previous video. So real quickly, the first thing I did is I established my center line. So this is 4.5. So at 2 1/4, I've got a line that's going to be dead center down the middle of the slingshot. Now my bands are going to be the same on all of these. I could make this for tubes. I'm going to put bands on it. So my bands are 7/8 of an inch wide, so I don't want to be real super skinny on top. I traditionally make everything 1 inch wide. So I came in 1 inch on each side. Now I'm not a big fan of real tall slingshots. It makes a lot more torque on your wrist. So I'm going to come down 1 3/4 inches from the top of this. And then this is going to be the gap from here to here to here that I'm actually going to be shooting through. All right, so now we can see our first cut. This part right here is going to be cut off. All right, so this is the angle I came up with. Now these are 7/8 inch, not 1 inch, so it didn't quite work out like I had planned. Now for the body of the slingshot, obviously I'm not going to just grab it down here somewhere, so I'm just eyeballing this. So probably around here is where I would say I'm going to hold the slingshot. So I'll just make a little mark about like this, and then I'll come over 1/2 inch and take a straight line up to the fork. I made this just a little bit wider than 1 inch, and I'll pinch this down with the grinder once I get it feeling good for me. Now, obviously this is going to be the cuts, and all this is going to disappear. I'm going to go ahead and put shelves on it for myself, just the way I naturally hold a slingshot. So I'm just kind of eyeballing this. I'll put a little shelf here, and I'll put a little shelf here. So something like this. I will leave them extra long and then grind them down into where they feel good to my hand once it's established. So you can see if you had a metal blade on a jigsaw or using an angle grinder like I usually do, these straight cuts are going to be a lot easier to get done than trying to use a scroll saw or something like that. These tabs, I'm just going to cut them square, essentially. I just want extra meat left on the slingshot. You can do all this work with a file once you start tuning it up, or you can put a flapper wheel on a drill or a grinder. But this is going to be quite a bit easier than scrolling the contour like we were able to do with the wood. So I got the frame just barely roughed out here, just straight angular cuts, and the grooves for my fingers are going to be done after the fact. So I knocked most of those rough edges off and then shaped it a little bit. And this is going to be kind of the grip on it. And I can lower this shelf a little bit. It feels a little bit high right now. The thumb feels pretty good to me. As long as I had a 36 grit belt on, I went ahead and roughed this up because this is going to be epoxied, so this will be a laminate. When we go ahead and laminate the wood to it, I'm going to keep them thin. I'm going to keep them a little bit on the thin side because I don't want a big bulky slingshot. So I'm going to go ahead and drill some holes in this. I came in 1/2 inch from the top, and then I've got my Got my compass set at 1 inch. And I'm just going to put another hole 1 inch down each fork. So size-wise, this worked out pretty well for me. I was able to come in a 1/2 inch to start my dowels, or my pins in this case. And then I set my compass at 1 inch, and I've got 1 pin every inch and all the way down. So it's going to work out pretty well. So I'm going to go ahead and drill 1/4 inch holes at all the spots, and I'm actually going to use hollow pins on this. It's going to give me a little more options. It's a unique look. There's not a lot of slingshots out there like that. And then I've got spots for lanyards. I've got spots for different attachments. I could put a flashlight on this slingshot. I could put a sling bow attachment on it. So this is going to be a lot of different options that you usually don't have with using traditional dowels. All right, so I got the holes drilled in it, and I just knocked the edges off a little bit. Kind of trued these forks up a little bit. This one's still not exactly right. I'm going to go ahead and camfer the holes a little bit. So I have a real strong desire to just take this to the buffing wheel, clean it up a little bit, and go shoot it. However, I said I was going to make a laminated metal core slingshot, so that's what I'm going to continue doing. I am going to look around, see the best type of wood I got for this, because this thing's going to look pretty cool, I think. I know I've got some black walnut. I might have some oak or something, but I want to keep this super thin. I have micarta, but I don't think I want to put the weight of micarta on this right now. But that's where I'm at now. With this step, I have a template. So I can take this, just scratch it out on a piece of wood. I'm going to cut oversized on the wood, obviously, and then go ahead and hit it in with the sander and find the metal through the wood, just like I did with the plywood core slingshot. So here's this big nasty mess after 24 hours in the epoxy. You can see the aluminum core here, how I am got plenty of overlap in the wood. I've got like, at least 1/8, probably 1/4 all the way around. So at this point, the aluminum is the shape and contour that I want. So I'm just going to, I'll bob these pins off first, and then I'm just going to follow the contour until I get into the aluminum, and then I can fine tune it from there. This inside area I might have a hard time doing with the belt grinder. I might have to switch to maybe a rasp or something, but whatever tools you have, you can get this done. You could do this just fine with wood files or rasp. A regular hand sander would work on this. We're just removing wood at this point. So I got my basic profile back real quick, but the deep part of this V here I can't quite get into, so I'm going to have to hand file this. I will take care of that real quick, and then we'll start taking these dimensions down this way. So I'm just working in one dimension and then working in the others. And I want this thing to be pretty darn skinny. I'm looking at maybe 3/4 of an inch total. So I'm just going to have maybe 1/4 inch of this black walnut on each side. And I don't think I'm going to go with a palm swell or anything. I want just something I can slip in a pocket and use. All right, so I got my profile pretty much done. You can see I got down into here. I ended up switching to a grinder with a flapper wheel on it to get down in here. And the sides are pretty close right now. This is about what I would want it, I would say. Probably a little bit skinnier, but I am going to give myself room to make my finger grooves. So now that this is completed, or closer to the actual size, this feels a little bit high to me. So I'm just going to fix it. I'm going to lower it down just a little bit, and then I'll start to sculpt a groove up, and then I'll make myself a dish for the thumb. Thumb feels okay. The forefinger just feels a little bit off. Once that's established and I get the grooves that I want, then I'll just clean it up and make it the proper width. But I need plenty of meat right now just in case I make a mistake. So I could go up higher grits on this. I really don't know that I am. And I probably will put a finish on it eventually. This is going to be my side. This is the shooter side of the slingshot. You can see I rounded over and dropped the forefinger. And I've got a pad, not just for my thumb, but it really incorporates the pad of my hand. So that's the advantage to a custom slingshot like this. So I like how this is turning out so far. I've never made a hollow pin slingshot like this before. I went ahead and chamfered the holes and drilled out all the epoxy and stuff. Before I make any rash decisions here on if I like it or not, I'm going to put bands on it and shoot it. It's pretty windy out today. I might lose some of the audio, so bear with me. But this thing looks pretty good so far. This has got a lot of possibilities as far as converting this into a sling bow or something. I think you might see more of this kind of thing in the future. As far as the size goes, I've got just a little bit sticking out where I could still go with a lanyard loop or something like that. So I'm digging that. This V, while simpler in theory, is harder for me. I would be much better off just gluing it together and using a hole saw, just like I did in my plywood slingshot build. I was trying to show a couple different techniques. This was a lot harder to get into for me. I had to switch tools and go with a flapper wheel on a grinder. I would have been better off with a rounded hole saw cut. It's a lot cleaner, and then I could have used the spindle sander. But whatever, you know, I'm just playing around here, showing you guys different options, things you can do, and it all depends on your tools and whatever you're comfortable using. Now, we can also see how if this was a larger through pin, this would be an ideal slingshot for a ball in a tube. So that's where you push the whole 3/8 tube through, and then I would attach it on the other side with a ball or a stop of some type. I've got a link to that on my YouTube channel if you're interested in that style. But I could put a tube through with a piece of paracord or something like that, attach it that way. I'm not going to cut grooves into this. I'm just going to wrap latex flat bands on it and shoot it for right now. I think this is going to be a flat band slingshot. I don't think I'm going to screw around with tubes on it. But if I have any slippage issues, I'll just cut a little notch on either fork. But most of the time I don't, and most of the time I have no issues whatsoever. All right, so I'll put some bands on this thing real quick. I might put a little oil finish on it just for looks, and then we'll see how it fits and how it shoots. So I've got my metal core slingshot all banded up. I'm not going to show you the attachment method for the bands on this because it's just not quite ready yet for prime time. Again, we're under a quarantine, so I didn't have exactly the hardware I needed, but it's definitely showing promise. So I love this slingshot so far. I love the metal core. It lets me get a really thin slingshot, super strong. I think it's kind of a neat look with these hollow pins on it. Definitely something I'm going to be experimenting with more in the future. Alright, so if you enjoyed this video, go ahead and click like, click subscribe, and ring the bell to be notified of my latest videos. So go find yourself a piece of metal, be it aluminum, light steel, whatever you can find, and go ahead and try to make one of these on your own. I will definitely be experimenting with this style of slingshot in the future. Alright, till next time, this has been Jamie Boggs from Burning River Bushcraft. See you soon.